Welcome to Question Time. Tonight we are in Liverpool. On tonight's panel, Lucy Frazer, former Solicitor General and Prisons Minister, now part of Rishi Sunak's team as Financial Secretary to the Treasury. Lucy Powell, Shadow Digital Culture, Media and Sports Secretary, previously Shadow Housing Secretary and Education Secretary. An MEP for 15 years, elected as an MP in 2019, now the SNP's spokesperson at Westminster on Foreign Affairs, Alyn Smith. Hussein, commentator and former Special Advisor at the Home Office and former Downing Street press spokesman, and Head of Media at the right-leaning Institute of Economic Affairs and columnist at the Conservative Home website, Emily Carver. Good evening, welcome to my panel, welcome to the audience here in Liverpool, great to see you, and of course welcome to you at home. Do join in the conversation in the usual way on social media at BBC Question Time, and let's see where the debate goes with you. So, let's hear our first question, which is from Richard Heath.
Following the completion of the Partygate police investigation, what can we conclude?
Right, so the Metropolitan Police have announced that their investigation is over into Partygate and the Prime Minister will be getting no more fines, neither will the Chancellor. Lucy Frazer, what can we conclude?
Well, we all know that the Prime Minister apologised for what he did and he's accepted the fine, he's paid the fine, and I think now what we can conclude is it's important to move on to and continue to deal with the challenges that are facing us as a country. So at the moment, I'm sure tonight we'll be discussing the cost of living. I know that's affecting people in my constituency, and the cost of living is affecting people across the country. We might discuss Ukraine and how Britain is leading the effort there to solve the problems that are facing the Ukrainians and our support for them. So there are major challenges facing us for the country, and I think we have to focus on those challenges.
Alyn.
I find that a remarkable glib response. The idea that we can just move on from this is actually offensive to me.
I mean, some people applaud it that way.
I'm a nut. I'm in favour of Scotland's independence. I think Westminster's on the skids. I think Westminster doesn't deliver good results for Liverpool and the UK, much less Scotland. But it staggers me that I can say with a straight face, and it's true, the UK Prime Minister broke the law. If you're talking about law-breaking hotspots, the key address is 10 Downing Street. It's staggering. It's like Berlusconi, but without the panache. It's a dreadful situation that the UK government, at the very top, broke the very laws that so many people suffered under during COVID. And the idea that we can just glibly, well, that was then, this is now, that's over. No way is that sufficient. Now, he may have got away with it because he got a compliant majority in the House of Commons, but I trust the people of these islands have more sense than that.
OK. Is the man in the blue shirt? Yes, you, sir.
Well, what you can conclude, I think, is a complete waste of time and money for £400,000 of police inquiry over 5 or 6 months to find somebody guilty of eating a piece of cake. We've got a pandemic, we've got a war, and we've got Brexit to deal with. The Prime Minister's got better things to do than worry about that.
OK. The man back there in the glasses with the mask.
Absolutely shocking and disgusting, to be honest, and I think there needs to be serious questions raised about the Conservative Party as a result of it. An apology isn't good enough at the end of the day, and there's been over 120 fines at the end of the day. You know, when people, lost people at the end of the day, it's just not acceptable, and I think, really, he needs to step down, really, and resign.
Okay. The woman here in the pink cardi.
I mean, yes, there are plenty of things that we've got to think about, but I was an honest citizen. I worked through the pandemic in a school. We had letters because we were worried that we would be stopped by the police for breaking the law. And he just gets away with it so smugly, a small fine. What's that to him in money? It's nothing. Yes, his reputation, but the rest of us suffered and obeyed laws, and he isn't even really sorry for it.
So the fact that the police investigation has ended, and as far as they're concerned, that's the end of the matter, what would it take for it to be the end of the matter for you?
I mean, I do think it has. We all knew it happened and money's been wasted, but he doesn't recognise and appreciate the sacrifices that other people made and that we followed the rules and carried on working through it. And that's what appalls me about it. There doesn't seem any real regret that's heartfelt and reiterates what the rest of us really felt and did.
They weren't sorry until they were found out.
Emily.
I mean, I understand why a lot of people are furious and have been furious with Boris Johnson over this. I do understand that. But I think taking a step back and looking at this at the moment, Keir Starmer himself is under the cosh. He's under a police investigation in Durham. We have Boris Johnson, who's been done for one fine for essentially, I don't think he even ate the cake at this event that he was supposedly at. And I just do think we need to look £460,000 of taxpayers' money going to an investigation over something so minor. What I think needs to happen, neither Keir Starmer nor Boris Johnson were particularly egregious breaches of these regulations.
I mean, Keir Starmer hasn't been found guilty of anything. He hasn't been given a fixed
pending. OK, but what happens if...
There didn't need to be an inquiry if the Prime Minister had fessed up at the beginning.
I just think there is so much more important matters to be talking about than this. What I would like to see the government do is have an amnesty on these fines, hand back all that money that was fined from people for breaking these ridiculous rules that, in my view, were contradictory, should never have been in place, were impossible for human social beings to live by. And I think that should be the lesson that we take away.
But I think that's the point, though, Emily. The point is these are the people who made the laws. And because they're not living the same lives that everybody else is living, they didn't understand how difficult they were to live around, and they broke them egregiously and on an industrial scale.
But to that point, do you not accept then Keir Starmer probably did also hand in his resignation because he's under investigation by the police?
No,
I mean, it works both ways. I think we should take a step back, look at this. The investigation is now over, and move on to inflation, Ukraine, etc., etc.
We'll come on to that. First of all, Keir Starmer hasn't actually broken any rules. This was on an industrial scale. If Number 10 Downing Street if Number 10 Downing Street was a restaurant or a school, it would have been shut down after 126 hours. And we can say here, well, look, there are big issues that matter. Absolutely, there are big issues that matter, and this is a whole sorry affair that, frankly, we all just want to see the back of. But there are big issues that really matter. But what is the Prime Minister doing about those? He's not helping people pay their bills. He's not helping people turn the heating on or go to the supermarket.
Well, I would agree with you on that point.
OK, well, hang on.
He's not doing what he needs to do. We've had months of the inflation coming now, and people are absolutely struggling and on their knees. And all we see coming out of this government is squabbles between Lucy's boss and Downing Street. Indecision, little wheezes here, buy now, pay later schemes. They are not...
But just sticking to the point, what can we conclude? Now, we've had very briefly...
I think what we can conclude
the completion of the investigation
is that there were breaches of the law happening at an industrial scale by people who made those laws, who didn't understand how other people were living their lives around them.
Man here.
He's not to be trusted. His health secretary, resigned when he was caught doing the dirty, as it were, with his trousers down in the Department of Health. And actually, whilst Boris and his team were celebrating over, cake and wine, the rest of the country was on its knees with ambulances queuing outside A&E, social care on its knees with not knowing whether patients will be coming in or out of the system. It's an absolute disgrace, and he needs to resign. That's the conclusion.
Now, I noticed when Lucy made a point saying, look, Boris Johnson said he's sorry, we all want to move on. There are a few of you that applauded, but I'm wondering if any of you have put your hands up, because it would be interesting to hear what you've got to say. Where are you? You woman in the green, were you one of those? No, you weren't. OK, so someone who applauded that point. Man in the pink shirt, let's hear from you.
Or 3 anytime soon. We've got to move on. There are just more important things out there.
OK. Mo?
I think that the trust point is going to be quite important because this is a self-inflicted wound that the government has created itself, partially because of how the handling of this happened, the changing of the line from number 10, and actually being transparent from the beginning would have been a much better position. There's also a party at the Department for Education that nobody's talking about because they came out and said, it shouldn't have happened, we shouldn't have done it, and we're sorry. We should have seen that. But it's also not really the end because you're still going to get the full Sue Gray report with more information. She'll be looking at things that the police haven't looked at. There could be more to come on that.
And do you think that will make any difference at the end of the day?
Well,
as someone who's worked in Downing Street, you've worked in the Home Office, do you think... I mean, is there anything the Sue Gray report could say now that could make any difference?
Well, we need to see what it says. Are there more pictures? Are there things that we don't know about yet? But I think it may not make a material difference, but it does chip away at the trust. And you have backbench MPs who have been holding their counsel, who have not been saying very much. They have to still go and defend this to their constituents. So I think it does chip away at the perception and the trust, particularly if the government's trying to get people to do something going forward. Why would they want to listen? And then you also have the parliamentary committee looking at whether there was misleading Parliament or not. So I think Prime Minister is out of the danger zone. There isn't much political pressure on him, but there are still a few things coming down the line which could still shift opinion.
OK. I'm going to move on to another question, if that's all right by you. But before I do, I just want to say that next week the programme will be coming from Belfast, Northern Ireland, a particular protocol. There's been a lot in the news recently. I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about. The following week, we're having the day off because it's the Queen's Jubilee. But after that, we'll be back in Dorking, and that's on the 9th of June. So if you live in or around Belfast or Dorking, do please get in touch on the Question Time website. You'll see the description for that on the screen, and then come and be part of our audience. We'd love to see you. OK, let's take another question now from Alexandra Duff.
Yeah, so with inflation at a 40-year high, what will it take to get it under control?
So yes, UK inflation 9%, quite possibly going higher than that. Highest level in 40 years, highest in the G7. What will it take to get it under control? How would you control it, Lucy Powell?
Well, it's very hard to get this particular sort of spike under control. I mean, as you say, it is unprecedented. This is the highest rate of inflation that we've seen for 40 years. It's the highest it's been in my lifetime. I think what's been particularly frightening about it is how quickly it has gone up. It's fueled by energy prices in particular, which we all know have gone up by 50% and more, are set to rise even further, and petrol prices, and now we're seeing food prices going up, and everything else as well. I think what's important to know, though, is that actually Britain is uniquely sort of extra exposed to this inflation compared to some other European countries because we haven't done enough to secure our energy, our just-in-time supplies like
But the question is,
so
what will it take to get it under control? If you were in power, what would you do now?
Well, the first thing we would do if we were in power now is help people with the impact of the inflation.
But the question is, what will it take to get it under control? So what would you do to get it under control?
There are some things you can do to get it under control. Obviously, it's mainly the job of the Bank of England to try and get it under control to some extent, but a lot of it is caused by energy prices. So we would ease people's cost of living experience by tackling energy bills with a windfall tax, which we may come on to discuss, which the government are completely opposed to. You know, the big oil and gas companies are raking it in at the moment.
Yes, but that's not going to get inflation under control.
Well, no, it's very hard to get inflation itself under control. You could cut VAT in energy bills, which we want to do as well. That would have a downward inflationary pressure. But because of the sort of forces that are behind this particular peak, to some extent, we have to ride it out. But the most important thing we have to do in riding it out is to protect people and protect the economy, because it is going to lead, if we don't protect people and we don't protect the economy by intervening at a scale and at a pace that this government is at the moment so far woefully not doing, then we're going to see ourselves going into recession and getting stagflation, which is low growth, low wages and high inflation, the worst of all the worlds. And that is where we're heading if we don't have intervention at a scale and a pace that meets the challenge that we are now in. And this government is not doing that.
So the question, what will it take to get inflation under control? Lucy, this is your specialist area. What would you suggest?
Well, can I just say Lucy is right that this is a worldwide problem. And the IMF, the OECD, the World Bank have all warned that high inflation is the most acute challenge globally.
But the UK has, but hang on a second, because the UK has, that of course is true.
Yes.
But the UK has the highest inflation of any G7 economy. So in France it's 4.8%, Japan it's 2.1%, Germany 7.4%, and we are 9%.
So I'll choose some different countries, if you like.
Sure, I'm just comparing it to the G7,
yeah, so
it seemed a reasonable comparison.
At the beginning of the year, actually, our inflation was at 7%, the US was at 8.5%, and the Euro area was at 7.5%.
So what's gone wrong? So much higher now, Lucy?
So there is, well, our growth increased over the course of the last year. We were the fastest growing economy in the G7. We've slowed this year because we grew so strongly last year. Lucy was right to say that inflation and the control of inflation is primarily the responsibility of the Bank of England. But to answer the question, there are two things that we need to do. First is to support people through this period with the cost of living, and we're spending £22 billion in doing that. And the second thing to do, the way that we will tackle inflation, is to encourage companies to grow and to get growth. And the Chancellor has laid out a plan to do that. He set it out in his May's lecture, expanded on it in the spring statement.
Has it?
And the plan is threefold. The plan is to encourage businesses to invest in capital, to invest in skills and people, and to encourage innovation. And that will bring our economy out through this very difficult period.
It's not what the President of the CBI has been saying, though. He said you've got no plan and you need to get one pretty quickly.
The man in the front in the grey T-shirt.
Both panellists now have mentioned the Bank of England. Are they both calling for large interest rate rises?
OK, I'm going to park that for a bit, but I will come back to that. Let's hear from the man in the plaid shirt there, yes, with the glasses.
Just like to know from Lucy, the Conservative MP.
Yes, it's confusing because they're both called Lucy. So if you just say Lucy, you're pretty much there.
Or I can hear from anybody if you like, but just at first, you work for the Treasury, you work with Rishi Sunak, and he's announced support for businesses to invest in businesses and hopefully get us out of this. But what is it that Rishi Sunak's going to do for us, the public, now? Because that's not going to help us in the now. And you've said about this 22 billion, and I've heard about 22 billion on the news. Every single day, it's everything that every Tory MP says, just this 22 billion. But I don't see any help. Like, you've given us a rebate for council tax that's actually a loan, it's not a rebate. And you've cut 5p fuel duty, which hasn't helped at all, because I drove past the petrol station this morning and it had gone up 3p just since yesterday. So where's 5p gone? So I'd just like to know what you're going to do to help us.
So I think you mentioned some of the aspects that make up the 22 billion. What we're trying to do is target the people who are the most vulnerable and who need the most support. So, for example, if you were on universal credit, if you were on universal credit, you would see £1,000 extra in your pocket. If you were on the national living wage, you would also see an additional £1,000 in your pocket. We've done £9 billion worth of support in energy. You mentioned that, some of that support. But can I just also mention, we've put in place some of these things that have already kicked in, but some of them haven't kicked in yet. So in July, so not that far away, we will have our cuts in the NICs. We rose the national insurance contributions. And for a typical employee, that's another £330. In October, so more of the energy measures kick in. So you'll see another £200.
OK, well,
so
let's see if that answers
that adds up to 22 billion, and it affects people in different ways.
OK, does that answer your question?
Not really, no, because like I said, you're increasing the threshold for national insurance contributions, and if you do, it only starts to affect people at a certain level, and then if you earn slightly more than that, you actually start. You're still paying more national insurance.
Can I just answer that?
I mean, I have to take issue, Lucy, because you cannot dupe the audience here that you are helping the most in need, because you're not. And you talk about a tax cut coming in July. It's your own tax rise. So you've raised everybody's taxes in April. And then And then you're reducing that same tax by a bit in July and claiming it's a tax cut, but it isn't. And the most in need are not benefiting the most from what you're doing. We've got a £200 buy now, pay later loan that nobody wants. The council tax rebate misses out the poorest because they don't pay council tax anyway. So that's why the president of the CBI, not necessarily known for their progressive politics, are urging you, along with a wealth of other people, to get some targeted support to those who cannot afford to heat and eat their homes, who are facing destitution.
I would just like to respond to that. So first of all, the NIC's
national insurance contributions, just for those not familiar with
the national insurance contributions will affect 70% of working people. It's costing us £6 billion. So it is helping people across the board. Secondly, one of the reasons that taxes went up was to pay for the health and social care levy. It was a tough decision that the government took, but we have taken a decision that many governments have been unwilling to take. How do we tackle the problem of social care? And when we all get old, there'll be some support for us there. And thirdly, I would just like to say, just to respond to Lucy's point, the Labour government have not said that they would take away that levy.
It's not a Labour government yet.
OK.
Long way off that.
Let's hear from our audience before we get bogged down the absolute minutiae of this. Yes, the man in the red top at the back with a white collar.
Isn't this time for the government to realise that we're a self-sufficient country and start bringing back producing and manufacturing our own energy instead of being held by ransom of these big profiteering companies who are taking our hard-earned money and making us look like fools?
Okay. The guy in the blue top and glasses.
So, the reality is that we can't get inflation under control, and what we should be actually focusing on is how we can support people, whether that be lowering VAT or a windfall tax on these big oil and gas companies who even said themselves that it's not going to stop their investment in the UK.
Mm-hmm. OK. And the woman with the blonde hair there, yes.
This government is always about delayed responses. July, October. 2.4 million individuals are relying on food banks right now. What are you doing for them?
OK. Emily?
Yeah.
Getting inflation under control.
Yeah, on the inflation question, I do wonder where our politicians were when the Bank of England was essentially asleep at the wheel. There was no mention of money supply, quantitative easing, the impact that might be having on underlying inflation. Then on top of that, of course, you have things that the government can't control. For example, gas prices across the world, the wholesale price there, you can't control. Russia invading Ukraine. But we did, over the course of the pandemic, and in years before that, pump huge amounts of money into the economy that has led to underlying inflation that we are seeing now spiking, and it is very worrying. There is no silver bullet. I think the Bank of England, the governor said he was helpless in the face of inflation. Well, why weren't you on the job to begin with? It's their job to keep inflation at a 2% target. They're completely asleep at the wheel. There is more that the government could be doing to help those that are vulnerable. I would like to see benefits in line with inflation. I think that's fair. The government are also benefiting from extra tax revenues from those energy and gas companies that are doing well in this period, so they could be using that to help those at the bottom. But, you know, the inflation question is so complicated, and I feel like the Bank of England have left it far too late to keep it under control.
No.
I think the pandemic point is quite important because there's a precedent set. So in the pandemic, the government spent a lot of money, intervened very actively in the economy and in people's lives. Many rabbits were pulled out of many hats, and that's happened before. So understandably, people are thinking, well, why can't we do it again? Why can't we have the help again? And I think there's an active move in government to try and move away from that, where the taxpayer isn't the first port of call for everything, and you get to some sense of a more conservative, smaller state, less activist, less interventionist. But I'm afraid the genie is out of the bottle. The government did go very far, and people do need help. And I just think the discussion we've had around non-fiscal measures, around childcare ratios and MOT feel a bit like window dressing. I think people need much more help sooner than October. I think we probably will see that sooner rather than later, but that's where the focus should be at the moment, because you can't control international factors, you can't control inflation by yourselves, but there are things that you can do that will help people now.
But the government could help with the cost of energy. For example, half of the cost that's when you go to the pump to fill up your car is government levies in one way or another. So they are adding a lot of costs onto people, and we go to the windfall tax, which sounds great, but there are unintended consequences to that on investment, particularly when we need more supply in the energy system. So I do think that there's a lot the government could be doing, but I am wary of populist measures.
Alyn.
Well, if we're talking about transparent sources of finance, I do hope we can start with Emily's organisation and the transparency of who we're all representing tonight. I am deeply worried.
Do you want to explain what you mean by that?
The organisation that Emily's representing
the Institute of Economic Affairs.
The Institute of Economic Affairs has been rated by various other think tanks as being non-transparent in the financing of its organisation. Now, we're all entitled to have our opinions here. We're all entitled to have our opinions here.
I'm my own person. I can speak for myself. Thank you very much.
Well, my concern is I'm concerned about who you're actually speaking for. I'm here because I was elected. She's here because she's elected.
Let Emily have a chance to respond to that before you answer this substantive question.
Well, firstly, the Institute of Economic Affairs keeps the privacy of our donors. We welcome when donors would like to say that they fund us or donate or give to our charity. But otherwise, I think I'm sat here on a panel as myself, representing my organisation, representing the fact that I'm a columnist at Conservative Home, and also representing the fact that I've done my research on many issues. And I think I certainly am very happy and deserving of being here. So, why are you here?
Do you want, and we're very happy that you're on the panel, Emily, would
on the point about interest rates, on the point about interest rates, I'm terrified about where the UK economy is going. Because of the macro stuff, we took quantitative easing for a long period that's built up a lot of inflationary pressure. And the way that inflation lowers traditionally is either by interest rates going up, which I don't want to see, or by a recession in the economy, which I also don't want to see. And because of Brexit, which was a self-inflicted hurt that's made us all poorer, we've got an incredibly tight labour market, which has resulted in high employment and low unemployment, which is to be welcomed. But we've also got really stagnant wages. So we're seeing people suffering with inflation, which is good for savers, but there's fewer and fewer savers than there used to be, and more people have high personal debt. And interest rates going up will hit everybody.
So what would you do? What would you do if you could?
Absolutely. We need to get real. And there was a lot of cross-party consensus during the COVID time. And the SNP supported a number of the measures that were really big, really brave, really bold that the UK government took. The furlough scheme being the biggest one.
OK, but hang on. What would you do? Let's get to the question. What would you do to get inflation under control now if you had the powers to do so?
Well, the Bank of England has the powers to do so, and I think we're going to see higher interest rates. And I think that needs to be prepared for. But what we do need to do is make sure that we're doing things like reversing the £20 cut to universal credit. We need to see much more aggressive intervention in the energy market. Now, there are global issues to this, but the UK's also got a broken energy market that needs much higher, tighter regulation than it is. The reinstatement of the energy cap, which would cost the taxpayer funds, would see a lot of people getting support that they actually need in their homes. And what the UK government did, same as every other European country during the COVID crisis, was borrow in the international markets. The taxpayer needs to step in here to look after all of us as a society, because we really do need urgent action on this. We needed an emergency budget in spring. What we got was 5 pence getting frittered away on petrol, which, as the gentleman says, did nothing, didn't touch the sides. It didn't go anywhere near where the problems actually are. And I'm terrified for how millions of people are going to be treated over the next few months and years.
OK, let's hear from Oren. It's the woman in the blue and white top there.
I'd just like to come back to something that Emily said, which was that we can't control global gas prices. But then yourself, you've commented on the fact that you'd like to see the energy cap reinstated. And I would just like to ask, how can we justify the energy cap not being reinstated when
hang on, just there isn't energy cap. It has gone up.
Yeah, brought back down when we hear that British Gas made over £4 billion profit.
And does it worry you that there could come a point where the government ends up spending so much money that at some point it's got to be paid back again? So, say, for example, bringing the cap back down.
Yeah, it does worry me a little bit, but it's like everyone here has said already, we need to do something now.
OK, the man behind you in the black top.
Okay. Yes, my question is to the Minister. The Bank of England governor, he failed in his job. Shouldn't he be sacked now? and get someone like to control the inflation. And to the shadow minister, Lucy, printing more money and giving away more money to the public would increase the inflation more and make the problem worse.
Okay. I'm going to come back on that. You come back in a minute, because I'm going to get one more part. The woman at the very back, the blonde woman with the blue and white top there.
What does it say about the government when the general public listen more to Martin Lewis than Chancellor?
Okay. And listen, I just want to give the two Lucys the last word. Because you were asking the question here at the front there about you pair in terms of raising interest rates. Yes or no?
Well, look, I mean, obviously we don't want to see interest rates going up, and that's why I was saying at the beginning that you've got to look at what the inflationary pressures are.
So no,
and
I'm just going to be really quick.
But I do want, can I come back on this point about printing money, because it's really important.
If you can do it in about 10 seconds, I want to move
on.
Well,
our plans are fully costed. That's why we want the windfall tax that will raise. We've got excess profits going into British Gas and so on. Into
BP, we mean. You meant BP earlier on, yes.
And so on. They're making excess profits. There's nothing to do with having invested. And that's
why no to interest rate rises.
Back to people's bills.
Lucy.
Well, the Bank of England controls interest rates, and it looks and studies a great deal of evidence, and there's the Bank of England's decision as to what to do on interest rates. I would just like to make one other point. Very briefly, because everyone has said the government needs to do more. So I just want to remind everybody the government spent £400 billion helping everyone during the pandemic. That was absolutely right. We stood by people when they needed it. The Chancellor has said he will do more, so he will be making a statement in due course.
Has he got the
but
computers working now,
remember, the government doesn't have any money of its own. The money the government has is your money, and we're going to have to pay that back at some stage.
All right. Let's take another question from Rami Gamen. There you are. Yes.
Is it okay to boo the national anthem?
Right, so Rami, you are asking this because of the Wembley finals, and Liverpool fans were booing, some of them, obviously not all of them, but audibly booing the national anthem. What do you think, out of interest?
I think they're 100% right to boo the national anthem, and the reasons for why they're booing the national anthem haven't been conveyed correctly by the media. 97 people were innocently killed going to a football match for fun, and they were unlawfully killed. And there was no accountability by anyone. And I don't know what's happening with the Hillsborough law right now, with Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham, whether that's being brought forward to the Commons. There were Man City supporters who booed last month in the semi-final, and nothing was said by the media. I just feel that the media are treating Liverpool so unfairly.
OK. Alyn, is it OK to boo the national anthem?
I don't believe in booing other people's songs. But I wouldn't criticise anybody who did, because for exactly the reasons that you say, and I think all of us politicians here who are here today, gone tomorrow politicians, but the public can get rid of us if you want, really need to be aware of the anger that's out there in the real world, and the contempt that the political class, call it that, is getting itself into because of Partygate and not obeying their own laws and not actually caring about the issues that people care about and people need. Now, I'm getting emails on a daily basis that would break your heart of people who suffered during COVID. And we've had 10 years of austerity, we've had 2 years of COVID, and now we've got war in the European continent, and COVID hasn't gone away. And we've got Brexit on top of that, we've got the economic consequences of COVID.
But how does that get us back to, is it OK, unless I've missed something here, Alyn, the question is it OK to boo the national anthem?
No, my point was, the anger that's out there about all of these things is real and will find a way to express itself. And it found a way to express itself.
But from what this man is saying here, it's got nothing to do with COVID and the pandemic. You're saying it's about Hillsborough.
I think that was part of it, but there's an anger out there that I think was represented in a lot of other ways as well. And I think this anger will find a way. So I wouldn't condemn anybody for booing a song at the moment.
Are there any Liverpool fans here? I appreciate there may be Everton fans as well, obviously.
No, they will.
Oh, no, of course they're playing a match. I guess they won't be. You won't have turned up. Any Liverpool fans here? Let's hear from some of you. So the answer we heard there from you, from Rami, what do you think, sir, in the glasses?
I agree with Jürgen. I think we really need to find out all the reasons why. Liverpool fans are smart, they're intelligent, and we need to get to why before we can kind of make a better world.
And why do you think it was?
Maybe for the reasons already mentioned, but also for things like elitism and the North-South divide and that kind of thing, class. So people maybe feel a little bit cut off and a bit... It doesn't seem fair, it doesn't feel like a level playing field.
OK, and the woman behind in the blue T-shirt there, yes.
I know quite a few people that go to the Liverpool games regularly, and some of the chants that the opposition fans come out with are absolutely horrendous. This is a deeper issue that, yes, it's Hillsborough, but Liverpool has been treated badly for decades. We have been forgotten for decades, and I think it is right for the fans to boo the anthem.
OK, Emily.
Well, I would have no problem with, well, essentially I believe in free speech, so people can boo whatever they like. Would I boo the national anthem? No. I probably don't share some of the grievances of those fans who did so I can't really speak to them. I personally wouldn't ban the national anthem. I think it's probably slightly disrespectful.
About banning it, but booing it, you mean?
Booing, yes, booing, not banning, no. Not banning the national anthem, but I can't say I share the same grievances as perhaps those fans do, so I'm not going to speak to them.
OK, speak for them, you mean?
Speak for them.
Yes, Mo.
Yeah, I think similar. I wouldn't do it myself, but I think it's important to keep this in perspective. This is not a new thing, and understanding the reasons why there is clearly, even in this Jubilee year, division in the country. There is scepticism of the establishment, to use that phrase. So rather than piling in and attacking people for doing it, maybe if we try to understand why it was happening and try to build consensus rather than not, that might be a way of dealing with it.
OK, woman here in the front.
It's people are taking it as like a personal thing against the royal family, and apparently Prince William was booed as well. I don't think it's a personal thing, it's an anti-establishment thing, because Liverpool has been treated so badly by the establishment. It goes back to Winston Churchill, sending gunboats to the Mersey to, intimidate strikers. And however much the royal family is apolitical, they are, at the end of the day, part of the establishment. So, it's just a way of voicing your, opinion.
OK. Man here in the white shirt and the glasses.
Yeah, I don't really understand why the media would focus on Liverpool fans booing the national anthem when at many games you get opposition fans making comments about Hillsborough, which is absolutely appalling. So is the media against Liverpool people and against Liverpool fans? Because traditionally we've always been a Labour city. And does that go against us in some respects with the media?
OK. Lucy Powell, is it OK to boo the national anthem?
Well, look, I mean, I wouldn't boo the national anthem, but I think what's absolutely not OK as a Man City fan is to boo a minute's silence for Hillsborough, and that was absolutely wrong. We should all remember, and I joined with some local Labour Liverpool MPs about that, who want to see the Hillsborough education programme going more widely across other clubs, and I want to see that coming to Man City. If Man City fans feel the need to boo a minute's silence out of respect for what happened in Hillsborough, I totally understand this city's ongoing anger about not getting justice for what happened at Hillsborough, not getting accountability and not getting people paying the price for what happened at Hillsborough, and that's still not happened. I do fully support Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham's calls for Hillsborough's law. We were trying to pass that in Parliament in the last session, but time fell away on that, so I think there are opportunities to do that. And it breaks my heart, actually, even more as a Mancunian, because as Mancunians, we sort of share some of those north-south grievances and some of those grievances with the media and how we're portrayed as city, how we're portrayed as football teams, and I want us to be in much more solidarity with Liverpool on those issues than we have been.
So, Lucy, on this side, the government has certainly said it's not OK to boo the national anthem, and that shouldn't have happened.
Well, I've listened really carefully to what people have said here in Liverpool, and I think two things. I think the first one is it's a great shame that people felt the need to boo for the points that you've made. I do also think it's a great shame that they did boo as well.
Yeah, you wish they hadn't?
Well, I understand what people have said, and I can hear the passion and the thought, so I take on board that. But I do think, people do associate it with the monarchy and the Queen and her Jubilee year, and I think for that reason it was a shame to do it as well.
Okay. Let's take another question from Henry Davis.
Is increased working from home good for society?
And what do you think? Are you working from home, Henry?
I work from home for 3 days out of 5.
And do you like that? Are you pleased about that?
The saving on the commute is great, but I would much rather be out the house every day, and I think it would be better for everyone if that were.
You'd rather be at the house every day?
No, out the house every day.
Right.
In the office.
Right, okay. And what's stopping you doing that, just out of interest?
Well, I can, but if everyone else isn't there too, then it's
pointless.
It's pointless, yeah.
Emily?
Well, I'm actually in the office 5 days a week now. Was quite quick to get back. I think that, for me personally, I think humans are social beings. I do think we benefit from being together in the workplace. I mean, some people I know hate being at the office and they prefer if they've got a young family. Then there are benefits to having that sort of hybrid working, being able to give more time to your family by not having to commute in. I mean, you can have commutes of 2 hours, some people, into the workplace, and that isn't potentially a particularly productive use of time, and it's probably not good for your mental health either in some ways. But I think most businesses are adopting a little bit more of a flexible approach. They've seen some people did benefit from being able to stay at home a little bit more, but I do think people are starting to maybe get the itch to go back to the office, and some businesses are trying to drag them in, even if it's kicking and screaming for some of us. It's quite interesting what the government are trying to do, trying to get civil servants back into Whitehall. Where I work in Westminster, it was an absolute, dead zone. There was no one there, really, for months and months and months. Now it seems to be coming back. People seem to be back in Whitehall in the civil service and all that, so it seems like Jacob Rees-Mogg's passive-aggressive note may have worked. The one that he left on their desks.
Man here with the maroon top and the glasses.
You have to be careful which jobs go back online, because when school went online, it created a lot of inequalities within private school and then public school. And I think also going online does have its benefits also, because I recently underwent work experience at a GP surgery, and seeing people be online then and having GP calls online allowed people to give more flexibility on where they were. So it does have its benefits, but you do have to be careful of the negatives as well.
Okay. A woman behind you in the green top.
I'm a civil servant, and I think that civil service leaders should let adults do the adulting and decide what's best for ourselves, instead of the likes of Rees-Mogg leaving smarmy messages. I prefer to work from home, and in my department in the civil service it's been proven that we are far more productive working from home. Plus the fact it's getting to the point where I can't afford the fuel to drive into the city centre anyway.
Okay. And the man at the back there with the glasses and the green shirt.
I think it's a complex question. I don't think there is one answer, but I do think, for instance, one of the issues of working from home is that employees can use it to not provide adequate working environments. I, for instance, work in the NHS, and there's a serious issue with having enough buildings, for instance, enough rooms to actually see the patients. And because part of us have worked from home partially in the pandemic, then you go back into work and you're trying to find a room to see the patients. It is a real issue. So I do think there is a double-edged sword. I do think it can boost independency for people and help a more flexible working style, but I do think it can also be exploited.
Okay. Lucy Frazer, we've heard mention about the sticky notes on desks from your colleague, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Is increased working from home good for society? I mean, we've heard the Prime Minister say no, because apart from anything else, you just go to the fridge and cut off a hunk of cheese and then wander back to your desk again.
Well, I think there are some downsides to working at home, and the audience has mentioned some of them. I think for young people coming into the office or starting, they need to learn and have mentors and learn from seniors. And if everyone's at home, it's very difficult for the young people to get the skills that they need. The second thing is I'm really worried about people's mental health, particularly young people. And as Emily mentioned, we are social animals. And we might all think we're okay working at home, but actually that social interaction is really important. And I think loneliness, particularly over the period of the pandemic. It will be becoming an increasing problem. And thirdly, I mentioned when you asked me what were we going to do, what was our plan in relation to improving growth and productivity. You know, one of the headings is about skills and people. And if we want to upskill people, if we want to retrain them, you know, you can do some of that at home, but you can also do some of it quite well when you're in the office as well.
Okay, I mean, the Culture Secretary, your colleague Nadine Dorris, said, why are we measuring bodies behind desks? Why don't we just measure productivity instead?
Well, there's obviously some benefits to working at home and some benefits to working in the office. And some people, I'm responsible for HMRC, and we can show that we're just as productive taking customer calls if we're doing that from home. But I do think you have to ask the question, is there going to be burnout for people working at home? So they might be just as productive during the day or their working hours, but are they going to feel that there's a culture in their organisations? Are they going to feel part of their organisations, or are they just going to move into another job? There's another point as well, which is if we could be anywhere in the country, great for the north or other areas where we want to improve work, but you could then employ people from other countries too. And so I think there's a risk as well about working from home.
Woman in the very back in the green.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow on with what you were just saying about the population and the mental health. I think it's a little bit too late because of what we've all experienced during COVID, and now we're all coming out of COVID. I personally have noticed a dramatic, oh my God, the amount of people that we come into contact with that are dealing with mental health issues because they have been isolated, they have been working from home. I run a daycare service in Knowsley, and we're out in the community, and people that we actually do support, they ran their own business, so obviously they didn't need to go out anymore, but through that they actually lost the business through COVID. Now they're experiencing the after effects, so they're picking the pieces up along with us with Knowsley Council too, and we are supporting them now with food service, food parcels, mental health as well. So it is the bigger and the wider picture.
Okay, man in front there in the blue top.
Slightly off topic from the original question, but it links very closely with what the ladies just said about mental health. I don't think whether a young person is or isn't out of school, or if they're being homeschooled, is the impact on mental health. It's the chronic underfunding in mental health services in this country. I work for a charity that supports young people with mental health problems, and they're presenting to A&Es, GPs, and are being supported by the emergency services when they're having a mental health crisis. They should be supported by mental health professionals.
Okay. Let's get back to Henry's original question. Is increased working from home good for society? I mean, Lucy Frazer has mentioned one point about if you're just starting out at work, how do you learn? Where are your mentors? How do you kind of pick up on those things around the office? And also, of course, there are some jobs that you just can't work from home. So then you end up with a situation where if you're going to drive a train, you're going to man a supermarket till, you can't work from home, and other people, of course, might be able to work from home. Then you end up with a divide there. Is that an issue?
Well, look, I think there's definitely advantages and disadvantages, but I think the modern kind of working settlement, if you like, is around flexibility and people being able to make those choices themselves. So a lot of people might work sometime at home, sometime in the office or travelling around.
But what about the man here who made the point, well, I'd like to go in more, but frankly, if no one else is going in, what's the point?
Yeah.
I mean, you just sit there on your own, you might as well be at home on your own.
And absolutely, and that's something he should very much take up with his employers who are responsible for your well-being as well as you getting on at work and being able to do your work as well. But you know, the digital revolution, which was catalysed during COVID, we all downloaded the NHS app, we all got on apps and had to show QR codes and all sorts of things that we'd never come across before. The digital revolution is here, and it is coming, and it is also key, if we can harness it properly, it is key to dealing with some of the productivity issues that we have in this country, which are poor. And so I think, you know, for someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who does feel like the sort of terrible sort of head boy prefect at some awful public school. He's like the opposite of sort of modern Britain, going around and sort of sticking post-it notes on people's desks. You know, it's the absolute antithesis of what modern working practice is, and harnessing this the opportunities as well as dealing with some of the challenges that digital working and different ways of working can actually bring benefits to our well-being and our happiness if we get it right.
So, Alyn, we've got some research, major private employers, some city firms, for example, PwC, Lloyds of London, a few others, are reporting offices only 50 to 60% full. Is that a good thing?
I think there's good and bad, and I think there's actually quite a lot of agreement on the panel on this. My concern with flexible working, technology was already changing the world of work massively. COVID has massively accelerated that. So my concern is that working from home, and there should be more flexibility, but let's make sure that we get the legislation right, that the benefits go to the workers.
Absolutely.
Not to the corporations themselves and the businesses. And there needs to be a meeting in the middle. And what we're living through is the consequences of COVID. And this was my point earlier, that COVID hasn't gone away as a disease, but also the consequences that we're going to be living with as a society. And when people are working from home and have an accident, is an industrial accident that your employer is responsible for, or is it you? That's not clear at the moment. Now, that strikes me as pretty fundamental. If you're working from home and you're paying for your electricity, should your employer be picking that up, or should you? If you had a season ticket that you now don't need, well, that's one thing, but what if you are called into the office? So all of these things are going to need to be worked out, and my concern with the current government is that they've got an ideological agenda to get people back into the office, whether it was working for them or not, because the economy is somehow powered by lunchtime sandwiches. And Jacob Rees-Mogg's post-it note, and the lady, the civil servant there,
on that point,
lots of people do know exactly what's best for them, and people should be allowed to make their own decisions, and we should see more flexibility in the world of work and less ideology.
It is actually interesting, though, because for one reason or another, London seems to have been most affected compared to other European cities in this way. We have the lowest footfall in the capital of this country compared to others. So it seems like we've very much embraced the working from home thing in the capital, which is quite interesting compared to other European countries. I wonder why that is.
Because our travel costs are so high, and housing costs are so high.
But also because of the sprawling nature of the city. People live in commuter towns and then come in, so it's just... And the cost, yes, is out of proportion.
No.
I think what this whole debate is completely missing is the point you made, Fiona. There's a lot of people this doesn't even apply to. They don't have the luxury and they don't have the choice of working from home. And I think focusing just on regulation around working from home and how we can make that more permanent risks alienating whole swathes of our economy, the people who are driving the buses, driving the bin vans. And that's important to recognise. I don't think you can have a one-size-fits-all policy either. I have benefited from the flexibility. I'm a dad to a 2-year-old girl, so I've seen the benefits of that and working from home. But equally, I don't think my experience should be the same as anybody else's. And I think, you know, if people can make their decisions, you can work flexibly rather than have diktats and mandates, that would be a good thing. But the point that this doesn't apply to everyone and quite a significant people will not benefit from this should not be lost on us.
OK, I've got 5 more minutes and I want to take one more question from Brian. Brian Barras.
Liverpool was stripped of its World Heritage status by UNESCO because of developments around the Victorian docks. Should we or could we try to get it back?
And do you think effort should be made to get it back, Brian?
Yes, firmly, because when we were given the award years back, everything in the city seemed to rise, the contracts and so on and so forth, and there was a good feeling. And then it came as a bitter blow to many people within the boundaries of Liverpool that we lost this status.
So UNESCO gave us their reasons because of the impact of dockside development and a new stadium for Everton. And that's, oh, lots of hands gone up suddenly very keenly. Yes, the man in the black.
Yeah, I encourage more investments and more job than title.
Right, more jobs, forget the UNESCO business, just
Yes.
get more jobs.
Title I don't think is important than new jobs.
OK, and the young man there in the black, dark shirt or dark top, yes.
So I think we should have it back because I think essentially we were just penalised for like trying to innovate and trying to make the city better. We're still steeped in heritage, there's still architecture wherever you look, but it was just like because we're trying to develop, we're getting punished for that.
See, I was looking at the list for who else had lost their World Heritage status and why. So the Elbe Valley in Germany lost it, basically because they stuck a motorway through the valley, probably. And Oman's Arabian Oryx Sanctuary lost it because lots of the oryxes died. So those are the only other 2 that have lost UNESCO World status. You're there in that company. Emily?
Seems pretty harsh for Liverpool to have lost its status on that basis. There's no massive motorway that's been constructed that I know of through the city centre, so it seems a bit harsh to get rid of it. I don't know how you reapply to then get back that status, whether that can happen.
But do you think it
needs to be
matters,
done.
basically?
Well, clearly it does to some people, and to others it doesn't as much. Obviously, jobs are crucial for people who are of working age. Heritage status is something that potentially people of all ages could enjoy and feel proud of. So, yes, I don't know how important it is to each individual in this room, but clearly it's important to some people.
I mean, Alyn, one argument for trying to get it reinstated is because it might create jobs, which is the point, Brian, that you're making.
Well, this is a debate that happens in Scotland all the time. Edinburgh has UNESCO status as well, and whenever there is a development, there's a lively discussion about, is this going to call that into question? And this is the tension that a lot of European cities are having to deal with. Do you want to live in Disneyland? Do you want to live in a theme park? Or do you want to see the development that's going to see those jobs? Now, the development done right shouldn't threaten UNESCO heritage status. And I think there's a case for Liverpool to go back to UNESCO with a, come on, let's think again about that. But this is a tension that a lot of cities are having to deal with, and it's a decision for you guys to make in Liverpool. I don't think, as a friendly outsider, it's for me to have too strong a view, frankly.
No.
Yeah, I think if you can remake the case, but in a way that the city has actually modernised and benefited from the changes that have been made, then it's probably worth a shot. But I think beyond the reputational impact, what difference does it actually make to you in terms of day-to-day life, in terms of the city's economy? Weighing all that up will be quite important. Sometimes these things sound great, but actually, do they drive public opinion? Do they make people feel differently about a place? And sometimes the answer is no.
Well, I mean, some suggest it's made no impact at all. The city's head of heritage preservation has made no impact at all on visitor numbers losing the UNESCO status. The Royal Albert Dock development has contributed £2 billion to the local economy since it was 1984, I think it was, when it was first built. Lucy.
Well, look, I mean, you know, Liverpool is a city a bit like my own city of Manchester, with a great, strong history of heritage and industry, but is now a modern, renewed, vibrant, growing city. And marrying those two is the key, as Alyn said, to that modern, successful city. And every development that happens in my constituency sort of faces similar challenges as well. But you don't want a city to be sealed in aspic, you know, like the pyramids.
I'm going to have to push you, so we're almost out of time. Should they try and get it back?
Well, I mean, maybe they should try and get it back, but I think UNESCO are going to have to be a bit more flexible about this, because cities need to change, and Liverpool is a great place to visit. It's a great city, and people don't need that label.
Lucy Frazer.
I think Liverpool is a great place. I think pride and community is really important, and I think if that's what the community wants, then it's a great campaign, but it's for the community to decide.
OK. Our hour is up. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you very much to Brian. I know you want to come back in. Forgive me, we've run out of time. Thank you very much to the audience here in Liverpool for coming along tonight. And, of course, thank you to you at home for watching from Question Time in Liverpool. Bye-bye.